Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 2 of How to Be Irish. I am absolutely buzzing to be bringing back the podcast for a second season, and I'm very excited to introduce our first guest very shortly. But before I do that, I just wanted to talk about this magazine that I picked up last weekend. It's called An Clogán. It's a new Irish Socialist Republican magazine, and there is a quote from the editorial that I wanted to read out, which I feel like very much represents a lot of what this podcast is trying to create. So I'm going to read this out. The editors, by the way, are Oisín Gilmore and Oisín Vince Coulter. One outcome of Ireland's post-2008 economic trajectory has been the renewed mass emigration of young people. While earlier generations fled the dole queues of a religiously dominated country, today's youth leave a liberalised, economically developed one that is still deeply dysfunctional. Unlike their predecessors, they carry no shame in their Irishness. Instead, they take pride in it. And as they live and work abroad, they encounter functioning healthcare systems, public transport, and public housing, and ask, rightly, why can't we have that at home? Now, obviously, the message of emigration comes up there, and I suppose questioning some things around Ireland's policies, political structure, and such. But what I really want to focus in on in this quote is the point that they said they carry no shame in their Irishness. Instead, they take pride in it. And I think that's a lot of what this podcast is trying to do, is to celebrate that pride by asking what it means to be Irish and to look at it in so many different ways. So I'm really, really excited to be kicking off season 2 with that kind of a sentiment. And without further ado, let's begin with episode 1. That stone had lain in that place as long as the oldest traditions in the village could remember. And from time immemorial, it had been the custom of the young men of the village to test their strength by lifting it. And if he raised it to his chest, he was a hero, a phenomenon of strength, and the men talked of him, whereas he who failed to lift it from the ground became the butt of everybody's scorn. Those are two separate quotes taken from Liam O'Flaherty's 1937 story, The Stone. And that is what stonelifting is very much about. It's about community, it's about showing your strength, it's about a rite of passage, and it's about something that's specific to your local area, the folklore that is tied in with it. Andy Downs from County Limerick is part of a growing movement to revive one of Ireland's oldest traditions, the lifting of legendary stones of strength. Andy has been travelling the length and breadth of Ireland in an attempt to lift every historic stone. His journey has led him to successfully lift 40 out of the total 47 rediscovered historic lifting stones. He's also played a role in researching and rediscovering a number of forgotten lifting stones, such as the 251 Den flagstone and the 183 kg coffee stone. Irish stone lifting brings together physical strength, historical research, and folklore, reviving a tradition that once marked rites of passage and community pride. His research into the forgotten practice of stone lifting has inspired him to create content that explores Irish folklore and history more broadly. Céad Míle Fáilte, Andy, how are you getting on today?
Very good, unearth. Delighted to be on. Thanks very much for having me.
Brilliant, of course. I'm so excited to learn more about the ancient sport of stone lifting. And I know, I've done a little bit of research, and I know that it's a bit of a thing that goes on in other Celtic countries like Scotland. And I also read it happens in Iceland. So I'm wondering, where does Ireland fit into all of this?
So where stone lifting came back from was Waterford man David Keown. He started lifting a stone carving that his wife Breda did out the back of his house during lockdown, just because he had no access to a gym. And in doing that, just kind of the act of stone lifting led him to the stone lifting cultures. There's documentaries on him already. I think they were done by Rogue Fitness on stone lifting in Scotland, Iceland, and the Basque region in Spain. So then when David saw, like, oh, there's a culture here for years in Iceland, there's a culture in Scotland. He's like, with Ireland being between those two, he's like, there has to be some culture of it here. So David did his bit of research, and he found notes from Peter Martin, who was the researcher who brought back stone lifting in Scotland. And Peter Martin had a small bit of research done on stones in Ireland, but it was very vague. He only had names. But on a common thread online, I think it was on Reddit or something, David saw Peter Martin talking to locals from Inishmore, and they said that the stone from Liam O'Flaherty's story, the stone isn't a thing of fiction. It's actually a real lifting stone, and it's still there in Inishmore, but that it hadn't been lifted in years. So David then went to Inishmore. He found the stone, and we couldn't lift it on his first attempt to go there. But that was kind of what sparked the revival into Irish stone lifting, because once he found that stone, it just kind of snowballed from there. People on the neighbouring islands, the Aran Islands, were hearing about it. I think the next stone he found was one on Inishman, the Middle Island. So there's a stone there in the graveyard, 153 kilos. And then from there on, Inisheer, and it just started to spiral from there. That there's a huge culture of it still there in West Galway, in Connemara. They never really lost it, but it was very small pockets of it, and it was the older generation. It's starting to die out.
Mm.
Some of them in Connemara, West Galway, would know about the stones. The stones had names, and they were looked after. But the practice of stone lifting, I'd say, was probably another generation from being lost forever. That
Wow.
the interest just wasn't there from the younger generation. But then from here in David's journey, he was led to Blind Boy, and he was on the Blind Boy podcast. And then, as you know, Blind Boy has such a massive reach that so many people heard about it from then. I think David went from a handful of followers up to over 30,000, I think, overnight after that Blind Boy podcast.
Mm.
And that's my introduction to stone lifting, as I was just sitting at home listening to this. David was talking about the stone he found in Inishmore and other stones, just the deep folklore that go with them. It's hundreds and hundreds of years of it. Like some stones there that were pre-Christian, they were cursing stones or Balan stones, were adopted into Christianity and then became tests of strength over time. I just found it absolutely fascinating. So it was listening to David on Blind Boy that led me into stone lifting, and I followed David on Instagram, started following his journey. And basically from there, I saw that David was organising a kind of a public stone lifting tour for the historic stones. He had two stone lifters from Scotland, John Annand and Jamie Gorian, came over. Very, very strong guys, but they're really involved with stone lifting culture in Scotland. So it was kind of a huge thing to have somebody over internationally lifting the stones, not just the Irish people. I had no training done whatsoever. I don't come from a strength background. I have no background in history or anything like that. I just found the whole culture behind it absolutely fascinating. So I said I'd tag along. My missus gave me a warning. She said, if you attempt to lift one of these stones with no training and come back injured, I'll kill you. So I stuck to my promise for the first two stones, but the third stone on the day then was 130 kilos. So I thought, sure, I might give a crack at that. And I gave it a go. I got it a small bit off the ground, but from there I was just absolutely hooked on it. Hooked on it from then on in. So I started to do more and more research, and then I was like, I have no interest in going to the gym, but I was like, I want to get strong enough and fit enough to be able to lift these stones. So I went down to the banks of the River Shannon near my house and plucked a stone, which I thought was probably about 130 kilos. After weighing it, it was only 85, and dragged that up the shoreline and put it into the back of the car. I'd say if anybody saw me, they're going, what is this absolute lunatic doing? So I started training, lifting stones out the back of my yard and everything. And I was just following more and more stones were being found. People were coming to David with more stories. And I said, I need to make it my business now to find the stone here as well. So from following David's work and what he was doing online led me to the Folklore Fragments podcast by Johnny Dillon, who is the head of the folklore department in UCD. And I think he's responsible for transcribing the National Folklore Collection online into the Dúchas archives. So basically, David and Johnny were sitting down, going through these archives from the National Folklore Collection and breaking down these stories where it's all about stone lifting. So just to give a bit of context there, the Dúchas archives are the National Folklore Collection. They made folklore part of the curriculum I think it was from 1937 to 1939, and basically sent 6th class students home to their parents and grandparents to come back with stories, be it of like local heroes, like famous runners, poets, etc. And I think it was a way of kind of claiming back the bit of culture that we lost while under English rule. In the local heroes section, that they had got the kids to research, it was where Stonelifting used to come up so often. So stories from, sometimes they've survived hundreds of years, even till 1937. The stories are a couple of hundred years old. You get me? So they were being passed
Yeah.
down from generation to generation of these famous guys who were able to lift these stones higher than anybody else, or that they were the only ones in the area that could lift the stone from the ground. So just to go back to Johnny Dillon's podcast, I heard them talk about a stone that was lifted in County Limerick. So like, I'm from Limerick myself. I was like, oh, I could be the first person to find this stone out. It's in Limerick. But the story was recorded in the town of Abington, County Limerick, about John Coffey of Scraggeen used to lift a large flag at Clare Bridge and leave it standing on the end of it. And people used to come from all over the country to attempt to lift the stone, but none could lift it but John. And David said he'd went in search of the stone and couldn't find it. So I says, I'll do a bit of research here. Now I've no background in historic research or anything. It was just something that really fascinated me. So I'd say it was 7 or 8 pages of Google searches looking for this Clare. Like, I just typed in Clare Bridge, looking for the bridge, but you see, all it was doing was bringing up bridges in County Clare.
Yeah.
Whereas the Clare Bridge was actually the name of this one. Now, it turns out I found it after, like I said, maybe 7 or 8 Google pages. It was on the National Built Heritage Services. They basically have an archive of every single listed building, bridge, monument, whatever. So there they had the Clare Bridge, which I was like, I actually know that bridge. That's at the Clare Glens, which is a popular walking trail just on the Limerick-Tipperary border. So I said, right, my next day I have a bit of time off. I'm going to go down and see if I can find it now. Look, a lot of the stories that we'd research, like, you'll go to find the stone, and even if there's a very specific location, like, a lot of these, they lost their meaning over time and they were broken up or put into walls or whatever. So I went down without too much hope. And I said, it's been modernized a lot as a walking trail within the last few years, that it's not very likely it's going to be there. So I went there on a Sunday, and I'm not joking, I was there for 10 seconds and I went, oh, holy shit, there's the stone, it's
No
right there.
way. Wow.
So I went down to the bridge because I know the area well. I'd actually often gone walking there. And I walked down to the water side, and literally, this is 3-4 meters from the bridge, there was the stone. Inside in the water now, mind you, but it was only under maybe an inch or two of water. I was able to stand on it in my boots and not get wet.
Yeah. And how did you
Um,
know that was the stone? Like, is there only one stone around there? Like,
see,
did you get a feeling?
I got a feeling anyway, but that was the thing with these stories. A lot of them said, like, oh, John Sheehan lifted a stone at a crossroads, and there's no description of the stone. It doesn't say where the crossroads was, whereas at least it said this was at the Clare Bridge. And the main thing was that it was a flagstone. These are they're recurring flagstones in Irish folklore. There's like, you hear about gold being buried underneath them. So from trudging through the Dúchas archives, like flagstones are a recurring theme.
Okay.
There's a few lifting stones as flagstones, but it's normally sedimentary rock, so that they can cut it from the layers and make it into like little rectangles or whatever. So this
Okay.
thing it's like, hence the name flag. So I looked around, I said, right, here's a very obvious flagstone. It looks to be in and around the weight that only one man would be able to lift it from the ground. So then I said, just to be sure, I'm going to walk up and down just in case there's 4 or 5 flagstones lying around here. But that was it. That was the only one I could see. So I was like, that has to be it. It's right beside the bridge. It fits the description. I think I estimated at the time to be about 170 kilos. So I sent that info onto David Keown. He got back to me being like, you fucking legend, you're actually after finding it. He said, I went and searched this, couldn't find it, but you're after doing it. That has to be the stone. So that was on a Sunday, and I think David's next day off was a Tuesday, and it had been torrentially raining since then. So the stone, which was under only like an inch of water the last time, was probably under about 3 foot of water,
Oh
because the
God.
river was so swollen from all the rain. So David came down, and I brought him down to where the stone is, and he's like, where the fuck is it? I can't see it at all. Like, so I actually had to lead him out into the water and say, it's around here. It's under about 3 foot of water. He brought wellies with him. Sure, as soon as he stepped in, the water came straight over the wellies. He was basically swimming for it. But I brought equipment that I got off my father for dragging this thing out of the water and everything. And David said, no need. He got in underneath it, and flipped it up on one side, and he single-handedly actually lifted it out from the water onto the riverbank that day.
God.
And between us, then we kind of flipped it into a better spot where he could give an attempt to lift it. David lifted it that day, probably got the first lift in maybe 150 years,
Wow.
which is nuts that it was just sitting beneath the water there. Probably John Coffey was the last person to lift that
Yeah.
from, and I think that we were probably around 1870 if he was in his prime. There's a guy, Derek Ryan, who runs the Tipperary Antiquarian page on Facebook. He does a lot of research on history in Tipperary. He actually sent me on the census for John Coffey, for the actual guy who lifted the stone,
No
when
way.
he was born and everything. So we're kind of thinking it was in around 1870 maybe when he was in his prime
Okay.
to lift that.
Yeah.
So you go
Wow.
to what, 2024 until it's lifted again. So it's just nuts that it's gone that long.
That's
And
incredible. So
go on.
just to step back a bit, like there's so much to talk about here, right, Andy? Because I get the feeling that this in Ireland, the survival has only been around about 5 years. If you're saying that David was the one that went and found the stone from the story, the stone,
Yeah,
and it's only
yeah.
from there. And you said in your intro that you have lifted 40 out of 47. So
Yeah,
have we gone
exactly. Yeah,
from 0 to 47 in about 5 years?
exactly. I
Wow.
think I'm not sure exactly how many years he's at it. I think it's maybe four and a bit. But like to have that many stones, and it's like, say, like Scotland has a rich history of stone lifting. I'm not taking anything from it, but there's an awful lot of modern lifting stones where they're placing stones where in historical locations, just to kind of bring stone lifting to a wider audience, blurring the lines a bit as to what's a historic stone and what's a modern stone in Scotland. Whereas like we're at 47, I think at the moment. There's more on the way, I'm assuming. Um, we're at that many confirmed historic stones. They're like, I think the the newest stone, as we'll say, would have been lifted by a man, Martin Tim. I think he was in Spiddle, and he only died recently. But
Okay.
so it's in living memory, there was somebody still alive up until recently who was lifting these stones. So yeah, there's 47 found. It's just nuts how the Irish people get behind something, and like that. It's gone from 0 to 47 in that space of time. It's just insane. Like I think Blind Boy is a huge help to that, because I think there was maybe a handful of them found, but once the reach got out and more people started hearing about it, and then David started gaining traction online, and he was on the Tommy Tiernan show as well. It just more and more of them every week were coming out.
Yeah.
Um, People were getting stored, like they were talking about it at home, and next thing the grandfather would pipe up and go, "Oh, geez, I know about a lifting stone down by my old schoolyard or down by the graveyard here, etc." So it's just crazy the amount of historic stones, not only that we have that many refound, but that they've been protected.
Yeah.
Because I've gone in search of so many of them, and I'm like, oh, there's been just houses built around here, and they were probably just crushed up and put into the walls or into foundations or whatever. So yeah, we're at 47 now, but I would say you could nearly double that in 2 years' time. There's just
Yeah.
more and more coming out of the woodwork, and it's all word of mouth now, because like the Dúchas archive has been a massive help as like a research tool. But at this stage, I think we've almost exhausted it. So we're just trying to, it's like reviving the National Folklore Collection, just getting people to go home and ask their parents, ask their grandparents, whoever's still alive, the older generation, if you know, like people in historic societies who might know about these, because otherwise they're going to be lost forever if we don't get these stories from the older generations now, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've only heard about the project that they had that you mentioned in about the 1930s. They got the school kids to write down the stories, and isn't that amazing that they actually got them to do that? If they hadn't have done that, like what would have been lost?
The foresight was mad. I don't think they realized how valuable it would be at the time. And I'd say the kids were probably disgusted
Yeah.
having to go home and do it, It was a bit of work for them.
Yeah.
But like it's a pity that, say, for stone lifting, that a lot of the stories were so vague that,
Yeah.
like I said, it's so and so lifted it at a crossroads, but there's no description of the stone or where exactly the crossroads is. But for the few that went into great detail, they didn't realize the help that they were going to be given to these lunatics researching stones
I know.
100 odd years later. Like,
I know, and God knows what they'll be up to in another 10 years or so.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, how many stones that we have found. If somebody is listening to this, right, and they're going, I feel like I've heard a story about a stone, or I have an inkling, or like, what should they do? How should they approach that?
You just go back and ask who it was that gave them the story, if they can remember that. It's a good question. I think there's always somebody in the locality who knows everything. You know, he knows
Yeah.
every bit of history about the area, and I think no matter where you are, you always have one of those characters. And if he doesn't know, he'll know someone who will, kind of a thing.
Hmm.
Um, but that's the thing. There's no real blueprint as to what to do, because this is such a recent revival. I think you kind of need to get confirmation that it was a lifting stone, because I think a lot of people got so excited with this revival, including myself. Like, I was messaging David before I met him with, "Oh, here's a stone I'm after finding there out in the field," and he's like, "Someone lifted it before." Do you know, you just get so gung ho with trying to find something new that, like, for if I'm looking for a stone, like, I want to hear that there's a story about it, but then have locals confirm it, or maybe like we've been very lucky with a lot of the stories that have come forward where someone has gone, like, I remember being down here on the shoreline as a young lad and watching my uncle and the lads when they came back from fishing, lifting these stones and testing their strength with one another. So to actually have an eyewitness report on them as well is great. That it's not just a very vague story behind it, because otherwise you could have someone will find a stone out their backyard and say, "Sure, my grandfather used to lift it," you know.
Yeah, that's it.
Um, but I see even a lot of them that we have accepted as lifting stones, it's quite a vague story behind it, but you're like, it's fairly plausible due to the shape of the stone, the location. Like, an awful lot of them are in graveyards. So the reasoning behind that would be that there was once a tradition in Ireland of the funeral games. And that funerals weren't this sad event that we have now, with everybody sitting around moping. And it was completely different. It was more of a celebration of life. So, like, it was a much more happy event. It was drinking, feasting for sometimes a couple of days before the body was put into the ground. But the funeral games were then, I'd say, kind of again, a celebration of life kind of thing, that there would have been wrestling, long jumping, running, races, etc. And stone lifting was an occurring theme there. So an awful lot of these historic lifting stones are located in graveyards. So you've the one there on Inishmaan, that it would have been lifted to the graveyard wall, would have been the full test of strength. And I think only two islanders in history had completed the full test of strength to lift it to the wall, until Tiernan Canny did it in 2024 to mate of mine from Mayo. There's another two stones located in Faha graveyard in County Clare, which is very interesting because you have a men's lifting stone and a women's lifting stone as well. So this wasn't just a patriarchal thing with all the lads flexing their muscles, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It was
I was going to
also,
ask you. Yeah.
it's fascinating that women's strength was
Hmm.
also celebrated, because you kind of think back then that it would have been a very traditional role, that, they weren't going to have the women out doing the same thing as the men. But no, in rural Ireland especially, women's strength would have been celebrated because everybody was out working. They were all working throughout the day, all
Absolutely.
day,
Yeah.
including the women and the children.
Yeah.
So everybody was strong. But the women's lifting stone there in Faha is 112 kilos. So, like, there must have been some fair strong women in Clare back in the day.
That's
Because
no
I've lifted it
joke.
myself and it's no joke, no.
Yeah. And so when you're lifting these stones, if we could maybe talk a little bit about the sport of it, or like how you might approach it and the technicality of it. Is there a rule book around them, or is it different for every stone?
What is kind of passed down was that there was kind of progress or levels to it. So what you hear in Ireland is the gui fui, or the wind under it, which is a very poetic term. It's
Mm.
lovely. So that just you get the stone barely off the ground, enough to put a bit of wind under it, put the light under the stone, whatever. From then on, the next progress would be to get it onto your lap. From then, it would be to your chest. Now, there's also record of lads shouldering stones. I don't think we've any historic record of people overhead pressing stones in Ireland, but there would have been a lot of them, like, lifted to shoulder. But there's a bit of controversy over that now, with lads are trying to replicate the same lifts. But you're like, we've a stone here now that's 150 plus years old. You're trying to lift it to shoulder and then take it down in a safe manner.
Yeah.
It's not like it's happened in Scotland where there's been a lot of these stones broken. And like lads come over, they're strong enough to lift it to shoulder. If you're strong enough to lift it that high, you're strong enough to put it down gently because
Mm.
grand, it's made of stone, it's hard, but stone can break. Um, like there was a Canadian guy over at the moment, very controversially, it was incredible lifting. Like he was lifting them, he lifted one, he overhead pressed it, and then no control in putting it down and just let it smash off the ground. Luckily, all the stones are okay, but like these aren't just stones to us. These have lasted hundreds of years, and hopefully, if we look after them and can pass on the stories to the younger generations, that they'll last for other people to attempt them as well.
Hmm.
Um, so I think you have to treat them with respect as well. It's more than just a
Oh,
rock, especially
absolutely.
to the likes of us.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a piece of history, and you're kind of
exactly,
reconnecting back with your history when you're lifting them. And
exactly.
so you mentioned that some of them are about 150 years old. Are you saying that's
Yes.
kind of the general? That's when the tradition started. Is there anything going back
Well,
further?
it seems to be when it died out would have been kind of famine times. That's
Okay.
what like kind of the general consensus with Irish stone lifting is that like it was still surviving in pockets, but like it's where it survived would have been the likes of Connemara or like whale-topped areas or very rural areas where it didn't get very built up or modernized too much. It survived, but the general consensus is that it was a lot of this died out after the famine. Sure, they say that the Irish population in itself like shrunk in stature by nearly a foot or something after the famine, just because
Oh,
all
of
the bigger, stronger
course.
lads died out, you know. So
Yeah.
I think that's where the culture might have started to die out as well. It was just we had mass immigration. Those who did survive after the famine weren't really thinking about lifting stones up as high as they could. I don't think it was more about survival. Um, so that's where that culture I'd say would have died off a bit. But like I was mentioning that stone that Martin Tim in Spiddle lifted, that would have been the more recent one. But we have some stones there that are going back pre-Christian times. You've got
Really?
cursing
Wow.
stones and Belan stones. So like I was involved in finding the Den flagstones, 251 kilos in Carrickabody, County Cavan, and that happened by pure chance. So I just told you the story about finding the coffee stone and posted a bit about it online. But Derek Ryan, who I mentioned earlier from the Tipperary Antiquarian, he posted about the coffee stone on his page because it was another bit of Tipperary history. And then I noticed in the comments that somebody else had said like, "Oh, there's a similar flagstone in Den Graveyard in County Cavan." Now I know David had done some research on the stone and thought he had found it, but it turned out it was a more modern stone. It wasn't actually the Den flagstone from the story. So like this guy left a picture in the Facebook comment and everything of the stone picture of the stone he'd taken from 1980, and he had a screwdriver beside it for scale and everything. So I messaged him. I was like, I thought this stone was found. I was like, have you any more info on it? He goes, have I any more info? He's like, I've been studying it since 1980. So he's a professor in the States. Wade Tarzia was his name. Um, and like, just talk about a pure fluke, just an online meeting. And then he sends me on an absolute tsunami of information. He had, like I said, pictures going back from 1980 up to, I think, 2012 of the stone where it was moved in different locations. He even had a historian sketch of the stone from 1941, I think.
Wow.
So, like, this stone, I'd say there is maybe 10 stories about it in the Dúchas archives that have sprung up. That it was previously a pagan cursing stone, and the curse was either loss or injury to cattle, and you had to flip the stone over twice. So like that, if you wanted to get the curse, you had to work for it. Flip 250 kilos over twice.
Yeah, that's no joke.
Um, yeah, and like I've seen the stone, and even to stand it up on one end is a fair feat of strength. So they really made you work for that curse anyway. And so it was a pagan cursing stone. From then they adopted it into the church. So I think it was
Hmm.
when Christianity came to Ireland, the main way of them like getting Christianity across was to adopt some of the pagan cultures in. So you had this pagan cursing stone. They carved a Celtic cross into the front of it, and then used it as the altar in the Catholic Church there.
No way. Wow.
So then I think it was during Cromwell's plantation of Ireland, then the church was destroyed, but the stone survived. And during penal laws in Ireland, then when Catholic Mass was basically made illegal, they used that as a mass rock. So that was the meeting point where Mass was going to be said on a Sunday. They'd all meet at the flagstone. So you have it going from pagan cursed stone to Catholic altar stone to mass rock. And then in later years, so we have maybe from the late 1800s onwards being used as a test of strength. And at 250 kilos, 251 kilos, it's an incredible feat of strength. And funnily enough, they had it in the Dúchas archives as 500 weight, which is 250 kilos exactly. Like a hundred weight would be 50 kilos. So to have it that close, I think they're only 1 kilo off with their measurement then.
How would they have
Um,
measured it? Do you know?
I think so. 100 weight would have been this solid 50 kilo weight, and I would assume it would have been on a scale. Like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these weights would have been just keep putting on your 100 weights until it would balance out or lift
Yeah.
off the ground or whatever. So I'd say that's how they got it so accurate. It was
It
almost
was so
500 weight
close.
to the
Yeah.
to the button. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But you have stories there of lads that were like lifting it to their knees, and one lad that lifted it off the ground, the priest put his hat underneath, walked around the man and grabbed his hat out from the other end of it. So there's all these different like feats of strength. It wasn't just a simple lift it off the ground conventionally. They had another feat of strength where they laid the stone down flat on the ground and they started building other stones on top of it, like a wall of stones. And there's a story that made it into the archives of a lad who built stones 3 foot high on top of the 250 kilo stone and then flipped the stones off from underneath. Kind of like a wheelbarrow lift that you'd topple the stones
Yeah.
over. Um, there's also another one, I can't believe it though, that there was, I think it was Larry Hyland of Banahoe. That was the name of the fella. He threw the stone up on his back for a bet and carried it a distance of 30 perches. I haven't a clue what a perch is now. Carried it 30 perches to the nearest pub, got a whiskey, drank the whiskey, and then went back to the graveyard and threw the stone back down. Now, how believable that is, I don't know. Like, I know there
Bit
was
of a
strong lads there, but I think there could have been arms and legs put onto that story.
bit of Irish exaggeration onto
Exactly,
that one, I think.
exactly.
Yeah, for a bit of drama, like for the
Yeah,
story, like
yeah, yeah.
yeah. That's amazing. So each of these stones, they almost have a different way of like you have to approach them. Like as you said, some of them you kind of only have officially like lifted it if you have it brought it up a certain point on your body, right?
Yeah, 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 exactly. But
Okay.
like I would say, just for anyone starting off, get just the wind under, just getting it off the ground, because I think preserving the stones for future generations is kind of our what we're trying to push mainly at the moment. It's not about how high you can get them.
Yeah.
Train up to it incrementally, and then you can start going for your lifts to chests, etc.
Yeah.
But
And do you think there'll be any kind of competitions or anything like that around it? Because I know in Scotland they do that.
there is competition. Now, personally, I don't like that. I wouldn't like to make a competition of it where it's you versus another person. Because I think what's great about this is it's you versus the stone, you versus yourself. It's like that. The stone stays the same weight. You might come there one day and you can't budge it off the ground. But that's happened to me. I've gone to stones 3 or 4 times and not been able to budge them off the ground, but it's only gone home and training. And then the feeling you get when you do, even just fractionally lift it off the ground, is unbelievable. Um,
Yeah. I'm sure there's a bit of a psychological element to the lifting of these historic stones. Like, I suppose it's probably almost like therapeutic in a way if you've completed it, you're building up to that
absolutely,
challenge.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a huge adrenaline rush to it. So like I'm at what, I've 40 stones lifted now. I would like to go back to some of these stones and lift them higher or get better lifts, but at the start I was really focused on just getting as many as I could lifted or see if I could lift all of them. But you're talking like the heaviest stone in Ireland is 257 kilos in it's in Seafin in County Derry. So like you have some that are just astronomical weight. Now I have lifted that because funnily enough it's an easier lift than some of the other ones because it's so tall. You're lifting the stone up high, you're almost already standing. Whereas with
Gotcha.
other stones they could be 230 kilos, but your
You have
back is
to
almost like
get it
that
up.
trying to get down to it. It's very
Yeah.
hard, yeah. So like each stone provides a different challenge. And then some of them have different traditions as to, like I said, how they were to be lifted. Like the one on Inishmore, like Liam O'Flaherty goes into great detail, and it's very poetic the way he describes it. He's like, it's a great day in any young man's life when he could raise the stone from the ground. He said, if you could lift it to your knees, you were the champion and equal of the best. Or if you could raise it to your chest, you were a phenomenon of strength, and the men spoke about you. But then through that story, the stone that Liam O'Flaherty wrote, it revolves around this old man who he's trying to relive his strongest moment in his youth and go back and lift the stone again, because in his youth he was able to raise it to his chest and kiss it 3 times. So anyone going back to that stone now in Inishmore, that's their main goal, is to become the pinnacle of the story and be able to lift it to your chest and kiss it 3 times. Now I think in modern times it's been replicated maybe 4 or 5 times, but that's by incredibly strong men. David Keown included. He lifted that to his chest and got the 3 smooches up very recently. I mentioned that like the tradition didn't really die out in some pockets, and there's one place it's near Carna. Ard West is the name of it, and there's a stone there. The Stone of the Cove is the name of it. I can't remember. Clough Arkeen is the Irish for it, but it's 188 kilos. It's the shape of it, because the balance is so off that it's even trying to get this stone off the ground is a huge feat of strength. But recently we had a guy over from America, John Sigelski, and he tried to stand the stone up on its edge to lift it, just to get, that's his technique. He loves doing it that way. And the locals were like, no, that's not how you do it. You put it down, you lift it
Really?
the traditional way. Yeah.
Ah.
So like, not only has the stone like stayed there and been looked after over the years, but also the tradition as to how it's been lifted is still being implemented there. And they're like, look, I don't care if you're strong enough to lift it that way. You don't lift it that way. That's just our tradition, and you respect it. And I really like that about it,
Yeah, I like
that
that too.
they've kept that.
It makes it something. It makes it unique. It's like, no, the stone itself dictates what the style needs to be or the approach
Yes.
has to be,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
exactly.
also still tied into the story and the folklore, which is a huge element of it. It's not just a sport; it's
Yeah,
a tradition.
yeah, yeah. Just from a lifting standpoint, that it like you could have a lad there, he's pulling 300 kilos on a deadlift in the gym, but can't lift the stone off the ground because it's a thinking man's lift. You can't just come up to some of them and just rip them off the ground, because the balance is so off. You have to feel around to get your handles on the stone and get to the best place to lift it. It's a very humbling experience where you might come up there and you look at it, you go, 120 kilos, sure, I'm doing more than that in the gym. The next thing you're struggling to even break it off the ground. It's very, very humbling. Like,
Mm. And you mentioned you had a stone lifting tour. Are these ongoing? Are people able to join these?
yeah, we're just kind of organising them sporadically. So David organised the first tour in Ireland. We went around 3 stones. We started in County Cork, the Clough on Darragh, the stone of the Red Chair. That's 203 kilos. From there on to um, the Thomas Lonergan stone in Shanrahan Cemetery in Clogheen at Tipperary. From then we went to Owen in County Kilkenny to lift the stone there. More recently, then my friend Martin Gallagher, who he was again very interested by David's journey and heard about him, I think through Blind Boy, he started researching stones. He's living in Donegal himself, or he's living in Fermanagh, but he's from Donegal. So around his area, he's been researching stones. I think he's found 3 historic lifting stones up his way. So we had the first North of Ireland stone lifting tour only, I think, 2 months ago. So it's just being organised ourselves, really. There's no, and like
Hmm.
anyone can come along. There's no money involved. We're doing it just for the love of it, to kind of spread awareness and get more people into it, and just to kind of spread the tradition and the respect behind it as well. That you're not just going dropping these stones from a height when you come on and do attempt them. But yeah, just we're hopefully going to have more stone lifting tours in the future, and try just get it to a wider audience as well.
Any of the content or information I found out online has all been in the last few years.
Exactly. And David has an awful lot of the work done, an awful lot of research done. We've Deirdre from Remnants of Our Past. I don't know if you come across her online.
I have,
Excellent
yeah.
history page. She's done unbelievable research for us in stone lifting and come back to us with stories. Um, so it's the more people that are getting interested and involved in it are actually coming back with more stories and more stones, and there's more and more being found. Um, like David had all that info out, and say he was posting his lifts, and we were all kind of going around together and posting our lifts. Some of them then were getting traction, but when somebody saw a lift, some lad lifting a stone up to his chest with no context, the comments were
Yeah.
like, "What in God's name are you doing? This is just a load of lunatics meeting up in a field and going lifting rocks." Like, so that kind of led me to making videos on TikTok and starting to do like in short form but informative videos. So like just to keep people interested, keep it short form, but just to add the context as to the history of the stone, how it should be lifted, who lifted it in history, and the modern lifters, etc. So that took off online when I kind of made the TikTok page Irish Historic Stone Lifting. I made that there recently. My missus was pushing me to make a TikTok because I kind of rambling here. When John Sigelski he came over from America in June 24, he saw the resurgence of stone lifting in Ireland. Now his moniker online is Travel Lift Stones Repeat, where he goes on Instagram. So he literally travels around to all countries that have historic lifting stones, and he wants to lift as many as he can. So John came over here with I think like 1,500 followers on Instagram, and we did a tour around West Galway on I think the 8th of June, and on the 9th of June then he came back my way and we did it all around the south, did the southern stones. And he lifted that stone that I found, the coffee stone, up to his chest. I think he was the first person in modern times. But it's just to watch his technique, how he lifted it, and what made it so viral as well is John is only 5'6", maybe 73 kilos, and he lifted that 183 kilos up to his chest with ease, made it look incredibly easy. But that just exploded his online profile. I think overnight then he ended up he came over with like was it max 1,500 followers and went home with over 90,000. So I
Gosh.
think that video of him lifting the coffee stone ended up getting 41 million views and a million
Oh
likes.
my God.
So it really kind of showed Irish stone lifting to an international audience, just a much wider audience, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
That's I was going to ask you actually, Andy, what your favorite stone is.
oh God, that's like asking me my favorite child. Like, okay, so I have a real connection to the coffee stone because it was the first one that I found. Um, that's such a hard question. I would say the Den flagstone just because of the history behind it. You know, like it went
Mm.
from like how many if that stone could talk, the stories it could tell you. Like
So
to
that's the
go
one
from
that went from pagan to Catholic to
exactly
Cromwell
to
knocked it
mass
down.
rock.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. You're like it's gone through so much history and to now be a lifting stone. And like that was buried in Den graveyard up until that Professor Wade Targia gave us the info and we found it last May. It was just buried there, and like it's one I love it so much. I love the history behind it. I love the look of it. The carvings in it are fascinating. But
Mm.
on the flip side, I'm like, I would be so terrified if anything happened to it. Do you know, if someone goes and attempts it and
I
they drop it
know.
from a height and stone gets damaged, you're like, in one way, I don't want to rob anyone of the experience of going to see it and putting their hands in it and attempting to lift it. But on the flip side, I feel like it needs to be in a museum at the same time. It's just such a
Yeah, it
special stone, you know?
needs to be protected or something. I suppose like
Exactly, yeah.
with our ring forts and other like ancient Neolithic sites, there's kind of like this unsaid respect about it. People, maybe might ask for permission before they enter these ring forts or any of these tombs, and I would hope that maybe the same kind of attitude might be applied to the historic stones.
Yeah, like I know it's not as spiritual as it might be entering a ring fort, but I just think like you've got it's so deep rooted in our ancestry and like it goes back so far that why would you be putting the stone at risk, damaging it like these dropping it from a height, you're like you wouldn't do it in a gym with the equipment there. So why would
No,
you do it with something that goes back hundreds of years and has such value to people? I just think
absolutely.
that there's a bit of respect needed. And I
Yeah.
have to say, it's very rarely coming from Irish people. It's normally people from abroad that are coming. They see the culture and want to give it a crack, but
Hmm.
they haven't really got the knowledge about the respect that's needed and how to place these stones back down. Because we're really lucky, none of them have broken yet. But there's some stones there that they have cracks down the side of them, and they're susceptible to breakage. Like,
Yeah, I know you'd want to be careful. Yeah. Hopefully now with a bit more awareness about it, that would obviously help that.
yeah, look, hopefully get the word out. Like, I'd love to have. Again, another one I'm torn on. I'd love to have the government get behind it to give it a protected status. But on the flip side, I'd say there's no way they're going to get behind that without stopping people from lifting it. You know, they're going to like, oh, the best
Yeah.
way to do it is just leave them alone. I would love for, because you have all these like protected status for heritages such as dry wall building. I think if we could have this tradition protected in the same way, that yeah, look, we know the risks involved in lifting a stone, for insurance purposes, but to still have that protective status put on the stone itself, that somebody can't move it or damage it, under penalty of law. But
Yeah.
again, how likely that is to happen, I don't know.
Yeah, you might be a few years off that yet. One more thing I wanted to ask you about the stones, actually, because I think a lot of them you have mentioned have been along the west coast, or at
Yes,
least in that side of general
yeah,
direction. I don't think you've mentioned anything like about Dublin or such.
no.
So I was wondering, was there kind of a purpose behind some of the stones? Like, were they tied to certain professions? Were they tied to certain
So
areas?
what we hear of a lot is fishermen's testing stones. So, for example, the Icelandic lifting stones, there is a group of stones called the Drittvik stones, where there's four lifting stones incrementally getting heavier. And it was basically a job interview. So how the heavier stone you could lift depended on your positioning in the boat. So if you could lift full styrker would be full strong. That would put you in the center of the boat where you would be doing more of the work, but you'd also get more share of the catch. So you have stones there that were job interviews. You hear a lot of the same in Sweden and Finland, where you had farmhood stones. If you could lift the stone and carry it for distance, you got a job on the farm as a labourer. We hear about it here, not in the stone now. There is a very interesting one. Now, we kind of have it accepted as part of our stone lifting tour, even though it's not a stone. There's a massive iron ingot at Blackstone's foundry in County Kerry. So if it was another job interview, if you wanted to work at that ironworks, you had to lift this iron ingot, it's such a weird lift. The lads estimate it to be around 220 kilos, but it's maybe 4 foot high, and it's only 8 inches wide. So you're hugging it around like this trying to lift it. It's
Mm.
such an awkward lift because it's so narrow and so dense. So that's another one would have been a job interview. And we hear of one in Inishmaan that was, what's the name of it now? The Tashdal Nasir Cliha. So the stonemason's test. If you wanted to become a dry stone wall builder on the island, you had to pick this granite sphere, not sphere, it was a rounded granite boulder. I weighed at 125 kilos. You had to lift that onto a dry stone wall to get an apprenticeship to be a dry stone wall builder on the island. So there you go again. It's another like job interview of sorts. Funnily enough, an awful lot of them are located outside pubs. So like
Really?
lads would get a couple of pints into them, and it's a pure drinking thing. You have it there even today. Lads get a bit of bravado with a few drinks in them. Say, I bet you can't lift that. I'm stronger than you. Whatever.
Yeah,
So
that's it.
outside pubs, so many of these have survived. There was like there's one in Owen in County Kilkenny that it was basically a stone on a roundabout, and lads would fill themselves with a few pints, and you have to lift the stone to chest and then carry it a full revolution of the tree. So there's a tree right in the middle of the roundabout. You have to do a lap of that, and then that was your successful lift. Whoever could do the most was the winner. I think infamously they said the one lad lifted it 3 times around the tree and left it there, but that stone ended up getting cemented into the wall in the early 1900s because lads were going out trying to lift it and they weren't able to budget, so they'd leave it in the middle of the road and someone would come on and hit it with a horse and cart or something.
Oh gosh.
So that got cemented into the wall, and it was um, a local man by the name of Robert. It was his father that cemented it into the wall, and he actually chipped it back out of the wall to allow it to be lifted by the modern stone lifters now, which is great.
Brilliant. So it's
Um,
reclaimed back from the wall.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Now, I think a few concerned locals have since cemented it back into the wall, so it's not available for lifting
Are
anymore.
you serious?
The guy that chipped it out, he has no idea who has done it, but I'd say the locals got sick of a load of randomers lifting rocks in the middle of their roundabout.
Yeah,
I
that must
think
be
this,
very funny. You're heading into your roundabout and you see a group of lads standing around a stone like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It'd have a lot of people scratching their heads, especially if they're not in tune with the whole revival of stone lifting in
yeah.
Ireland.
Oh, that's gas. Listen, Andy, before we finish up, I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests,
Yes.
which of course are on the premise of the podcast, How to Be Irish. So I wanted to ask you, what does it mean to you to be Irish?
I was dreading this question. I was absolutely dreading it. Look, I watched back a few of your podcasts just to be familiar with it, and that question really frightened me. Now, what a lot of people have said is connection, and I think that's what resonates with me as well, is connection to Ireland. And for me, it's just going out, seeing these historic sites, getting in touch with my folklore, my history, and reliving these feats of strength that our ancestors used to do. But that's just my thing. I think for anyone, it's just connection, and it's so subjective. It's in your own way. If that's speaking the language, speaking Irish, if it's playing an Irish instrument, playing an Irish sport, I think it's just it's completely subjective. But I would just say to anyone, connection. Just try to get your own bit of connection to Ireland. And I found mine through our history and folklore.
Obviously, stone lifting is an ancient Irish sport. Are there any other ancient Irish sports that you have found out about since getting involved in stone lifting?
That's a great question, actually. I'll plug it anyway. Next week is the revival of the Talton Games. So you might have heard of the ancient Talton Games. I think
Yeah.
there's a touch of mythology around it. I think it was it Lou Longfada put
Mm-hmm.
on these games to honor his mother Taltu or something. I'm
Yep.
very unfamiliar with that story as such, but it was revived, I think, in the 1920s, kind of like Ireland's own Olympic Games. And Liam O'Sullivan is reviving the games in Kells Priory in County Kilkenny. Now, it's not a competitive thing, it's just an exhibition of the ancient Irish sports. So you'll have David will be there doing the stone lifting as well as a few other lads. I think Diarmid Ling, who used to play hurling for Wexford, is there. He's promoting wild hurling, so it would be kind of like an older form of the sport of hurling. I'm quite unfamiliar as to how it's played, but I think it's done over a much longer distance and will be played
Hmm.
primarily on the ground. Now, I'll have to touch up a bit on that, but collar and elbow wrestling, which is a lost Irish martial art. There's an American guy by the name of Tom Higgins, who has a conventional wrestling and MMA background, but he's involved in bringing back this lost culture of collar and elbow wrestling. So that's going to be at the games as well, I think.
Okay.
So there you have this wild hurling where it's really catching on, and it's been at a lot of these festivals where they're promoting it and having exhibitions about it, and the very same as the collar and elbow. So that's the stone lifting in turn has brought me onto these. I don't know a whole pile about them, but I probably will know a bit more after next weekend. So
Brilliant.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
next Saturday the 20th now. I know this will probably be out after that, but
I reckon
just
so, yeah.
yeah, but even to get the word out about the Talton Games, because even though it's only an exhibition this year, I think down the line it could lead to something competitive, and
Hmm.
it's I think it's a brilliant idea. Just getting in touch with our more Irish sports and a more historical version of our sports as well, as opposed to just the usual GAA.
Yeah, like as you said, like it connects you with the country itself by if you're getting involved with these old traditions or old cultural ways. I'll have to look some of these up because I've heard of wild hurling. Is it similar to the puck fada?
I don't actually know.
Yeah.
I only came across it very recently, and I know that
Okay.
Diarmid Ling from Wexford is the man that's kind of spearheading that revival.
Okay. Very good.
But it's just great to hear that you've more Irish sports coming back like that, you know.
Yeah,
And so many
absolutely.
people have gotten behind the stone lifting, and hopefully just as many people will get behind those sports as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you heard it here first, lads. Get training because the next Tailteann games are coming around the corner. You have enough time now for the next year's one.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Oh, well, Gurv Mila Mila Mahagut, Andy. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, all I'd say is just my socials. I'm at Irish Stonelifting on TikTok and YouTube. Instagram, my handle is at Hand Me Downs, and you just get me at Andy Downs on Facebook. So
Perfect.
yeah, like I'm doing content on the stone lifting and just trying to branch out into more Irish history and mythology and folklore as well.
Yeah, because you do stories. I saw you do a few like spooky stories and stuff like that. So I'm sure you'll be busy now coming up to Halloween soon.
That's it. My missus loves her haunted stuff, so that's my way. I get to go stone lifting, she gets to see a spooky location, so it's a bit of a
Yeah.
win-win situation there.
I
Yeah.
I was watching your one on Curra Chase because I'm from Limerick as well,
Oh,
and
very good.
yeah, I would know Curra Chase very well, but I didn't know the
Yeah.
story behind it. I honestly I couldn't finish the video. I thought it was so
Go
scary.
ahead. Yeah, and like I've just been trying to cover what historic locations are near me at the moment. But it was only in doing a bit of research on Currachit. Like I'd always known about the story of the Lady of the Lake, but I'd never heard that there was actual like written record of an exorcism that was done there. So I found
Yeah.
that fascinating.
No, the
Um,
bit that freaked me out the most is like there is no more like written information on this exorcism. Like after it was done, it was like, did it work? Did it not work?
yeah, you just have to go there on Christmas Eve now and find out.
Oh, geez, I'll pass.
Very
Listen,
good.
thanks a million, Andy, and yeah, best of luck with the continued revival of stone lifting. I'm very excited to keep following it, and yeah, I'll be sure to share it on how to be Irish and such on the social media. So
Yeah,
yeah, if anyone
absolutely
wants
great.
to find out more, and definitely watch the videos of what it looks like because it's a fascinating thing to watch. The way that you approach it, getting it up onto your laps and such, is really really cool.
Yeah, and I think just the kind of camaraderie, everybody roaring each other on is very infectious as well. Just how animated we get while we're doing it.
I'm sure it is. I'm
Um,
sure it is. All
so
right.
yeah, just one final message is that if anybody could just go home, ask their grandparents, older people, someone who has knowledge in history, see if we can get more of these found and protected, and if I can get more of them lifted, please and thank you.
Let's get you up to
Oh,
50 at least,
yeah,
anyways.
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
That's it. The half
Absolutely.
century.
Yeah. All right, Gurmila.
Carmela, thank you very much.
Gurmila Mila Mahagut as a veg éisteach leis an géad episode. She's a bit of Berlix there, géad episode of How to Be Irish. That was Andy Downs of Irish Historic Stone Lifting. If you want to find him on any of his socials, thank you so much for joining us today, Andy. I am looking forward to the rest of the season. There's going to be a lot of different guests, different perspectives on Irish culture and what it means to be Irish. As always, I really appreciate the support of my listeners. And as I've said before, I'd love to say it again. If you can share this podcast with somebody who you think would be interested in it, that would be absolutely incredible. I'd really appreciate that. You can find us on Instagram at How to Be Irish. I am delighted to say that since I last spoke to you at the end of season one, the Instagram following has grown significantly. So I hope perhaps maybe some of you watching this here today are some of the new followers. Thank you so much for following along. There was a couple of clips that went viral over the last few months, particularly at the start of the year. So, Fáilte Roibh Galéir, you're all very welcome to the podcast, and I'm looking forward to having you stick around for quite some time. Slán Abhaile, and I'll chat to you again soon.